What I wanted to do was just show you some pictures of our church in India, and then go into my message. But just a little brief about myself. I basically grew up in Hyderabad, India, and I went to Ambassador College in 1984, and I was telling some of you that I was there when Mr. Armstrong passed on, and his funeral was held in 1986, and we were there at that time. I met my wife Mary there, and we got married in 1988. But I graduated in 87. I went 3 years into college because I had previous credits, and so I could finish in 3 years. I trained under Mr. Abner Washington. I presume some of you know him, and was in the LA church serving with him for 1 year before Mary and I decided to go back home to pastor, our church there in India. Mary and I run a school, and of course I continue to pastor the church even though I help her with the school, and so it is more like part-time for me, even though I have been basically pastoring the church now. This is my 29th year doing that, and so time has gone on, right? And of course, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have about India and the church there. And before I forget, come on to India. Please visit us, and we'd be happy to host you. We'd love to have you there, so I must mention that. But we are called Grace Communion Church. We were thinking of what name to give our congregation, and somebody said we must have the word church in there, because in India you need to be identified as a church, and the word church helps. And so we call ourselves Grace Communion Church, and our you could say motto is to be blessed by being part of the congregation, but it doesn't stop there. We want to become a blessing to our community and the people that God gives us contact with. So if you go to the next video, Joe. Thought I'd just show you, this is the map of India, and it's kind of sort of elongated like that, but let me see. Right there is Hyderabad, and it's kind of towards the south, but more or less middle, and that's where we have our congregation. And I had to fly Hyderabad to New Delhi, and then that was a 2-hour flight, and we have a small congregation in New Delhi. And of course, to come here, I had to fly New Delhi to London, 9 hours, and then London to Charlotte, 8.5 hours. So that was a fair bit of flying hours. Right. This one here is Mumbai. It used to be called Bombay, and we have a church of about 12 people there. And so this is my circuit. I travel from Hyderabad, New Delhi, Mumbai. Then we have some scattered members in the eastern part of the country, and I more or less travel once a month to those parts, and of course many of it is by having to fly, because it's very difficult to get to those parts by driving. If you can go to the next slide, Joe. I thought I'd just show you the icon of Hyderabad. The government of Hyderabad decided that they will use this structure, as the icon. It's called the Char Minar. Char means 4, and Minar is minarets. You got the 4 minarets there. This structure is about 400 years old, and it was built by the erstwhile king of Hyderabad called the Nizam, and he was supposedly one of the richest men who lived in those times. And so this was a monument to those who perished in a plague in that part, and this structure has remained for 400 years, and this has become the icon of Hyderabad. Next slide. I must show you the traffic in Hyderabad. If you probably notice, some of our streets get clogged like that. And if you can see the various kinds of or modes of transport, here you only see cars and cars and cars, but there you have cars and you have tricycles, we call them auto rickshaws, and we've got bicycles and we've got motorcycles. We got an occasional buffalo walking around. And I wonder if you knew that the traffic of Hyderabad has a description even in the Bible. If you go to the next slide, you'll notice that the Indian traffic is described in the Bible. If you can press that thing once again, there you are. All right. That's what we pretty much do on our streets in Hyderabad. Right? We have a saying, in India, we drive on the left of the road. Yeah, you drive on the right side. But many times we are driving on what's left of the road, because people are filling up every little space, and you got to jostle and you got to fight for your space, and you just can't let it go. So, all right. Okay, next slide. That's my congregation, I could say. This is a photograph of those who came for our festival. We still hold, we call it the festival now, every either September or October. And this was last year, and our people from the area that I pastor. All right, next slide. This is also the congregation in Hyderabad, but this was when we had a mission trip of a group from Pasadena come. And let me see. That place there is Michael Morrison. Have you heard of Michael Morrison? Right. He and his family, that his wife and daughter, along with 4 others actually, came to Hyderabad, spent a good 10 days with us, and we took them to the places that we normally minister, especially to the orphanages, and of course they did a wonderful job with the school where Mary and I run, and they were able to sort of minister to the children mostly, and of course we had a seminar which they hosted in church, so that was nice. Next slide. This is the summer camp that we held in 2016. We had about 25 children. I'm not sure if I've sent you a video of that, but we have a video of that. We put it on YouTube, and we try to have a summer camp, and I just heard that one of your summer camps is just about to begin. We just have a 3-day summer camp because it's so expensive, and we had various kinds of activities for these children. These children are basically, they go from 12 on till about 16, and we try to do that almost on a yearly basis. All right, next slide. This is one of our outlying areas where you remember I mentioned we have members scattered all across the country, and those 2 people are the Nirales, and they are from a Hindu background, and they live in an area which is dominated by Hindus, and it hasn't been easy for them to be Christian and to be followers of Jesus Christ. And so we make sure that every year we go and visit with them and encourage them and pray for them. We go over a weekend or so, and I take a pastoral team with me. 4 of us went by, and some of their neighbors who are sympathetic to them came and attended, and sort of stayed with us for some of our meetings. So I thought I'll just show you that these places are fairly remote, and it is not easy for some of us to continue to be disciples of Jesus, because things can get a little rough for these people. Yeah, next slide. All right. Let's see. This is our elder. His name is Franklin Poppins, and he's got a scooter. We call this a little scooter. And he was going to distribute literature that we had printed in church. And we give it to bookstores and we asked them to distribute it free. And we were taking, I think it was, we made a recent booklet called Divine Healing. And we were able to distribute about 500 copies of those to various bookstores. And that way be able to spread the message. Right, next slide. This is our Sunday school, you could say, children. We have kids right from age 4 till about 15, 16. And every Sunday we have a Sunday school during sermon time. We bless them and they go off into an adjoining room. And we have 2 of our ladies conduct the class for them during sermon time. Right? Next slide. I just wanted to mention this is Mrs. Noah, and she is our senior most member. She's 85 years of age, and she still comes to church. She loves being there, and it's such an encouragement to see. She has seen the church through all its changes and reformation, and she is held on to the congregation, and so I thought I must show you a picture of hers. The next slide. This is, you can't see the name very clearly there. It's called Asha Kiran Children's Home. As a congregation, to fulfill our motto, we want to be a blessing in the community, and so we reach out to various orphanages. And this is one of the orphanage, and the children here are basically, if you go to the next slide, I think you can see this is actually my wife helping a child write alphabets. And so this is more or less a picture that shows what we try to do. We try to sort of give them an opportunity to help themselves by providing them some help from the church. But if you go to the next slide, this is some of the children in the orphanage. And they are basically children of parents who are incarcerated in prison, and they have no one to look after them. And this home takes them and provides them, of course, with accommodation, food, and education. And so we try to raise material for them or funds for them, and on a yearly basis we try to help them out. I must mention that, I don't know if you've heard of Orphan Sunday. There is something called an Orphan Sunday, which comes in November. I think it's the first November of every year. The churches conduct what they call as an Orphan Sunday, and we have people come, and we collect certain resources to be able to provide for Orphan Sunday. We plan to do that in November this year. All right, next slide. This is an old age home, and we also serve in an old age home, providing them with various kinds of materials that they need. So this is another outreach of ours as a congregation. We provide them with that help. All right, next slide. Oh, that's my family. My son Ashley, and my daughter Leanne, and my wife Mary, and of course myself there. This is a little older picture. So, as I said, my son is in Edmonton, and I will be visiting him after this. I think that is probably the end of the slideshow. I've got another PowerPoint as I begin my message here. There you are. All right. I don't know if you get some news about India, but this has been something that is being discussed in our country. To give you a background, about 6 months back, there was a family that lived in the northern part of India, and this family was from the Islamic faith, and of course they eat meat. They are meat eaters. But there was a rumor spread in the community that they probably had killed a cow and stored its meat in their refrigerator. And that rumor went viral. And there was a group that gathered around their house and began to shout slogans and started becoming very violent, to such an extent where they ransacked the house and killed the man, the husband of the family, in his own home. And ever since that time, this debate has raged on in the country. And one of the reasons for this is we now have a government that has a more fundamentalistic perspective. They are Hindu fundamentalists, believe in a fundamental, perspective, and they want to see Hinduism being the major religion, being hoisted upon everyone, and everyone should respect that. Even though we have a constitution that respects all religions, we are free to practice and propagate the religion that we believe in. And yet, this particular government that is now in power for two plus years have been trying to slowly make India a Hindu nation. Just as you can see this kind of fundamentalist perspective being hoisted in various parts of the world now. And so the papers and the media is fairly active, and they took this up, and they had this caption, is a human's life less worth than a cow? And that was the question that was asked in that article. And they were very bold enough to put that article. And so that's the question I want to answer today. What is a human's worth? And we have to debate that on a regular basis in a country that we live in. And so I thought what I'll do is, give you some perspectives of various worldviews on how people consider human beings. And of course, what is our biblical perspective? What does God say about us? And what is our worth to Him? Right? Now, if you go to, before I go there, maybe we should go to the next slide. There is a humorous side to this also. It's strange, but in tragedy you sometimes also see the humorous side. But the cow is venerated in India, worshipped. It is supposed to be a sacred animal. And the goat is a delicacy, even among Hindus. And this caption about how the goat longs to be a holy animal, considered to be holy, so that probably his life would be saved. But just as you call, a buffalo or a cow's meat beef, we call the goat's meat mutton. I don't know if you've heard that word, but right. Just go to the next slide, Joe. Thank you. But humans, what is a human's worth? And today you find all kinds of perspectives with regards to how people regard human beings and humans for sale. I mean, you've come to a point where we traffic human beings. On many times we hear about how children are abducted. And in India, this is another menace. Sometimes we have children missing, and they are actually sacrificed to certain deities. Or sometimes they are trafficked, into various kinds of brothels, and it is very sad. But how do we as human beings consider others? What worth do we give to human beings? In India, the male is considered more of greater worth than a female. And that's one of the reasons why we have a regular problem with the girl child versus the male child, the boy child. I don't know if you know, but we almost have about 500,000 female feticide. That is the killing of the female fetus 500,000 every year, because they consider the male child to be of greater value than the female child. And that's the reason why we still have a ratio that is very unhealthy. The male being something, much higher than the female. And so that is the unfortunate worth that we give to a human being. They don't consider a female child a human being, or rather less of a human being than a male child. And that is so unfortunate. Now, you must have heard of the caste system in India, right? And that is still, unfortunately, fairly prevalent in our country. The belief is that, apparently, according to the legends of India, human beings were created in different castes, different levels of worth. And those who come under the lower caste, we call them, you must have heard the word Harijan or the Dalits. These are the lower castes. Have you heard of the word Brahmin? They are supposed to be the higher caste. And so you got this gradation amongst human beings in India. And the caste system is, like I said, still a menace in our country, even though there are lots of people trying to sort of somehow get rid of the caste system. Recently we heard that a boy was beaten up in a village because he touched the vessels in which the higher caste people cook. He touched it, and he was from a lower caste. And he was beaten up because he had polluted by his presence and his touch the vessels used by the higher caste. There are stories of how, sometimes people have to, especially in South India, we've got small rivulets over which there are small bridges where people have to cross, and only one person at a time could cross. And there's a story that if from one side a higher caste person comes, and from the other side a lower caste person comes, the lower caste person is supposed to give way to the higher caste by jumping into the river, because he's not supposed to be, come in proximity to the higher caste. And so this is how they value another human being, and especially from the caste system. Recently, a man called Mr. Wilson in India was given the Magsaysay Award because he has been fighting for the rights of people, lower caste people who do manual scavenging. Have you heard of manual scavenging? That is, the lower caste people are supposed to clear the excreta of the higher caste, and they call it night soil. And he has been trying to fight for the rights and say this is not right. Just because they come from a lower caste, they are supposed to do something like this. And it is very unfortunate that so many of them live having to do this, because that is what that's the kind of job they get. They are not allowed into jobs that only belong to the higher caste. And so there is one image that stays in my mind. We as Christians in India are also considered to be on the lower caste, even though some of us have converted from being from higher caste. I remember an image when I was a young boy of 6 or 7, and I lived in a neighborhood where many of the children used to get together to play, and we were playing, and we play the game cricket. I don't know if you heard of that. It's something like baseball, but it's a little different. We used to play in the neighborhood, and sometimes we used to get very thirsty. And I remember there was a person in his home watering his garden, and we used to go there and many of them used to drink water from the hose. He used to use a hose to water his garden. And I remember that when I went once, he said, "Oh, I'm sorry, I can't let you drink because you're a Christian." Right? And for some reason, that image stuck in my mind. I was discriminated against. And as I remember that now, I think to myself, well, this higher caste Brahmin refused me water because I'm supposedly from a lower caste. But my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ has given me living waters. Right? So what a contrast, our Lord. So you can begin to see how Jesus treats supposedly lower caste, and then you have this discrimination that takes place amongst us human beings. Talking about that, we have been hearing about what's been happening here in your country, and one of the captions that comes out in the media there is "Black Lives Matter." And I thought to myself, why would you say that? Why is it being said? Because apparently black lives are of lesser worth, or that's how it is considered. I'm not sure how it is considered here, but that's a very powerful caption. But talking about blacks and whites, did you know that we also had a racist theory in India? There is a legend in the Indian among the in our part of the world. We are called brown. We have brown skin, and so you got the white, the brown, and the blacks. And there is a legend that goes like this: when God decided to create human beings, it was like baking a cake. And he took this dough and mixed it up, put it in the oven. But he took it out too soon, and so it was more or less white. And that's how the white race came to being. But then he decided that he will make another batch, and he mixed some dough and put it in the oven. But this time he left it too late, and it came out kind of burnt and black, and that became the black race. He said, well, I'll do it once again. Took some dough, mixed it up, and in the oven he put it just for the right time. And it came out brown. And the brown race, that's the brown race. And so we've got our own racist theory, But, sadly, this worth that we ascribe to human beings, sadly, has also crept into the church. And sometimes we discriminate based on either race or caste or color, and that's so unfortunate. But let me go to what does the Bible say? What does our God say about our worth as human beings? Does he look at us as black and white or brown? Does he look at us from the different caste perspectives that we have? If you can go to the next slide, I want to read you this scripture from the book of Romans chapter 5, where it says in verse 6, "You see, at just the right time, when we were still powerless, Christ died for the ungodly. Very rarely will anyone die for a righteous person, though for a good person someone might possibly dare to die. But God demonstrates his own love for us. In this, while we were still sinners, Christ died for us." Who did he die for? Everyone. Doesn't matter if you are brown or black or white. He died for everyone. Interesting, it says in verse 7 that very rarely will anyone die for a righteous person. In other words, from our perspective, however good you are, nobody would go to the extent of sacrificing your very own life for that person. But what has Christ done for us? He says that I am giving you my life, right? And this is inclusive. When we were powerless, the is all of humanity. It has no discrimination there. It just talks about the ungodly, and that is all, that all of us are ungodly or were ungodly. And so Jesus would consider us precious enough to want to die for. Right? If you go to the next slide, just show you these some of scriptures and just to pick up thoughts on how God values us. In 1 Peter chapter 1 and verse 18 it says, "For you know that it was not with perishable things such as silver or gold that you were redeemed from the empty way of life handed down to you from your ancestors, but with the precious blood of Christ, a lamb without blemish or defect." I thought that was very interesting the way it's put. Notice, our redemption was not with material things like gold or silver. God felt that we were so precious that He matched it with His life. So our redemption is not material, but is relational. And isn't that what we have been focusing on? The relational. We worship a relational God who values relationships with us. And so it's just so wonderful to know that God values us so much that He came down to give us His life, not just silver and gold. In Ephesians 1, which is the next slide, and in verse 4 it says, "For He chose us in Him before the creation of the world, to be holy and blameless in His sight. In love He predestined us for adoption into sonship through Jesus Christ in accordance with His pleasure and will." Once again, that verse, I'm sure we have read it many a times. But what are we predestined to be? I mean, it's not just God's slaves. We are not just destined to be foot soldiers for God. We're not destined to be extras like Hollywood would, want extras in their movie. We're not just employees in His big company, in His big corporation. We're not just His bodyguards, or His watchmen, or His servants. We are His sons and daughters. We are destined to be part of God's, children. I mean, and that was something He chose from the beginning. We were always on His mind. Isn't that what we say? I mean, we were so precious. And so you can begin to see how God values us, that He would want to redeem us from our situation, even, by coming down to die for us. I'd like to look at one more scripture, and then I'll just want to show you a video. But the next one is Matthew 25, and once again, this is another familiar one. But once again, notice how it's written. "The king will reply, 'Truly I tell you,'" and I'm sure you know the story of the sheep and the goats, and how God separates the sheep from the goats, and He says to these people that, He says, "The king will reply, 'Truly I tell you, whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me.'" Very interesting, I thought, that Jesus says that even if you've done it to the least, least in our eyes, least from a caste perspective, from a color perspective, but who are the least for Jesus? He has linked their worth with His own. That's the worth that He ascribes to even the least that we would consider least. And so Jesus Christ doesn't discriminate based on any of the things that we have mentioned before. He has given to us His most precious possession. And that is not gold or silver. That is Himself. Right? He has given Himself to us. And it shows us how precious we are for Him. And so How does God view us? How does God look upon us? Well, He certainly loves to see the black, white, and brown because He's a God of diversity. But He values us because of who we are. We bear His image. That's our identity. What I'd like to do now is show you a video. And I don't know if you've seen this video. I'm sure you. It is from your own country. It's called The Hoyt Story. The Rick and Dick, father and a son, and it brings out something very very interesting. And I thought, let me just share that video with you, and then I'll come back to make some closing comments. What I like about that video is we as human beings are basically worthless on our own. We can do nothing. We are just so useless, like Rick was. But our Father in heaven loves us so much. We have so much worth to Him that He would not run alone. He wants to include us into His Trinitarian perspective, His Trinitarian love. No matter how ungodly we are, no matter how much we have fallen, He's not going to leave us. He's not going to run alone. He's decided to include us into His wonderful family. That's how much worth we are. And so, my brothers and sisters, sometimes we feel worthless, don't we? There are moments that we feel so completely useless, a sense of rejection. Many times I read about suicides in India, and many young people are committing suicides because of the pressures of life. I'm so sorry that they can't reach out to someone because they feel so rejected. And we have gone through our moments of rejection and loneliness. But it's in those moments, please remember, we have a Heavenly Father who loves us so dearly because we are so much of so great worth to Him. No matter what our color, what our caste, whether we are male or female, He has given us and adopted us for sonship, and someday we'll realize that in the second coming. Thank you so much for this wonderful opportunity to be here. God bless you all. Hopefully we can meet up again sometime. Thank you. Thank you.